everybody. Welcome. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us live. Thanks for joining us for replays. Welcome back to I'm Possible Live. And delighted today to welcome another guest who gives me goosebumps in a wonderful way. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. And the coolest part about Michael joining us is going to let Michael introduce his fabulous self and give you a chance to get to know him. And while you're settling in, grab a beverage because we're going to toast later, virtual toast style. We're going to let Michael tell us a little bit about himself today. And then we're going to dive into a really cool topic that I'm grateful that Michael helped us come up with today is marketing, art, or science. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce you or reconnect you with the talented Michael Roach.
Thank you, Melanie. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for inviting me here to have a chat with you today. A little bit about me. My name is Michael Roach. I'm a marketing strategist and consultant. My firm is Michael Roach Creative. And what I do is work with small businesses and nonprofits and support them so that they can grow, increase their customers, and boost sales. And the other thing I do too is train business leaders and marketing teams on the tools that they need to use to really succeed in today's tricky and murky, hard to navigate market. So that's what I do, and I enjoy every day of what I do.
That is fantastic. I absolutely love that. Michael, how'd you get into this?
Great question. I got into this, I would say, through grandma's backyard, as some would say, in a very circuitous path. I started out as a graphic designer, and back then, in my early career, I knew that I always wanted to do something very creative, and it was at the time when computers and creativity and art were just kind of like blending together in this wonderful fusion. And I was doing graphic design in a financial environment with financial firms and very buttoned up environments. And I love the constraints with that. And at that time, shortly after that, I moved from New York City to upstate New York, and had to kind of pivot my career a little bit. And I was looking for a lot of those graphic design kinds of positions, situations, and in fast-paced environments. And I transitioned into IT, became a programmer, and really embraced the technical part of my mind that I love to work in. And, hence the, like the technical, the science of what I do today. And then after that, I pivoted again and got into marketing. And I didn't realize it at the time. And I had a lot of entrepreneurial stops and starts in between. But I didn't realize that marketing seemed to be like the best bridge to connect the creative side of what I was doing and the technical side of what I was doing. And it was like the perfect marriage. It was the perfect embrace. So that's kind of how I got started. I got into marketing. I got involved with the American Marketing Association, and I really cut my teeth on, meeting fellow marketers, learning best practices. I did a lot of reading. I immersed myself, not just in marketing, but just the world of entrepreneurship and business. And that's what brings me here.
That is so cool. What part of the city were you from? I'm the girl from the Boogie Down Bronx.
Same here.
Okay.
Yeah.
What part of the Bronx?
I'm from the area of the Bronx called they call it the Valley, but it's just right outside the Co-op City area.
Is this a joke? Is this a joke? Have we
No, not
had
at all.
this conversation before?
Yes, I think we did. Yeah.
Wow, that's a way back then. So, Catherine, you're gonna laugh because my parents just moved from the valley. So
Oh,
Michael is right. It's the reminder of small town. I used to hang out in Co-op City. I was grateful. I grew up in the valley, but I wasn't typically a valley girl. I didn't go to school in the valley. I went
mm,
to school in Manhattan. So a lot of my friends were from Co-op.
mm,
They were from Co-op because that's where we spent our weekends in the bowling alley, and the kids from Co-op were bused to the bowling alley, and that's where I hung out. So it's thank you very much for reminding me of that take us back in the day, and reminded me of wonderful tidbit after hanging out in the capital region near you this weekend. I should have remembered you were from the Boogie Down Bronx.
mhm.
I love to as hey Chris, how are you doing? Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Chris, let the world know. Hey, toast across the mile. Sorry I'm a little late. Smiles across the miles and toast to welcome you. Let us know where you're from. Let us know who we can introduce you to, who might be in the audience or watching on a replay. Let us know how we can help you. And thank you, Chris, for joining us from sunny Florida. The part I think is interesting is Michael put a great question in there that it reminds me to ask, and we'll ask as Michael helps us answer it, which is marketing and art, or is it science? Which is
So
it,
what is
Michael?
it, right?
Which one is it? Which one is it?
Well, it is a wonderful question, and it's hard to just answer the question and never talk about it again. I think you always have to ask the question and talk about it, because as we evolve, as we continue through this, um, through all the things that we're doing in business, and even just being a consumer, you have to ask yourself this question, and the answer is it's both an art and a science. Sometimes, depending on who we are and what we're doing and our experience, we see marketing as an art, where we think of, stuff on billboards, stuff on signs, and maybe lettering, or, a specific font, or the way graphics appear on a screen. And sometimes the consumers, us as consumers, we see things that way. And then as consumers, sometimes we see things as, hey, we'd like you to be part of a survey or a poll, and to get your feedback about a new product. And that might be our experience on how we're part of marketing as a science, because us as consumers are put into a database with our thoughts and feelings and our perspectives, and they're taking our temperature so they can launch a product that appeals to a wider variety of individuals. So, but from a business standpoint, when we're in business, it's both. It's hard to be in one area and not the other. And I'm going to definitely step through some examples on both sides to kind of help point that out. And like I said, it's hard to talk about just one side and not the other. You have to really embrace both sides.
Is it a blend or is it a balancing act?
Oh, that's a very great question. Um, it's a blend, I would say. It's a blend. If you are someone in business, an entrepreneur, a startup, then I think it's a balance. It's a balancing act. You have to be able to adapt to the day, to what the problem is, or that I wouldn't say maybe the problem, but maybe the challenge that's happening in the business of that day, or a customer that comes in and needs something, or your customers or clients need something in their lives, and then you have to kind of figure out how to address that um, with art and science, or a combination of the two of marketing. So yeah, I think it's both for
Eh,
sure.
thanks for that, and it reminds me of an earlier conversation I was having in our Creating Connections to Scale masterclass, where trying to help others navigate the process of creating a relationship to scale, to grow, to increase revenue. That as we're trying to do it, whether we're trying to do it in person, whether we're trying to do it online, or whether we're doing hybrid, the mix of it is the act of, as you're saying, and I love that you mentioned startups. We really need to think of it as my blend, almost as if we were coming up, we're the barista or the coffee importer or the tea person, or we're making the chai or the cappuccino, where we're trying to
Mhm.
come up with some sort of special, unique mix. And
Right.
I think it really can be challenging, especially for startups. I was talking with somebody who's been in business a little bit less than a year. They're probably at the stage of what they would say it's their side hustle, and they're
Mhm.
hoping it becomes their full-time hustle, and they're putting a lot of energy and drive to kind of grow it. But I think as a startup, that navigating part of what you're saying, the balancing act part, you kind of feel like you're on the seesaw. You're not really sure, and we can feel that way when we're not startups too, you know? At
Right.
at turning points, it can kind of feel like a roller coaster a little bit, or, some sort of tilt-a-whirl or Ferris wheel to which we don't have the controls. But I love what you're saying about the balancing act part, because I think you have some really mad serious tools you can share with us in the process of talking about that. One, I know I really appreciate it because you mentioned it during Be Visible Shifts in the spring when we were talking about brand guidelines. And I'm delighted to say that I met Jackie Barker, who is taking the rest of my Canva fear lens off, as I thought I kind of blew up Canva the other day, for lack of a better word, but can actually say, start and have brand guidelines. So, where should we start if we're at the beginning of that balancing act?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned branding guidelines. So yeah, let's start there. So you you say, hey, to the market, I have something I want to sell, and it's something that the market needs. So you go into business and you create something for yourself, right? And then, well, what does that business look like? Do you have a logo? How are people going to recognize you? Are you going to use a lot of different colors or maybe two or three, right? And then you have to use them consistently. So you, a lot of businesses will need to develop a branding guidelines or guideline statement or document. And really, it's a set of rules that allow you to consistently communicate your brand to the rest of the world, to potential customers out there, or even current customers, so that you consistently use the right fonts, you consistently use the right colors. Um, and that doesn't mean you can never use other colors. It just means that you use an established set of colors all the time for your brand when you're communicating with folks. And and also I should mention, there's some colors that you probably want to stay away from because they might communicate something negative in the consumer's mind. So I think branding guidelines are a great place to start. And as you start to ask questions about, what do customers want to see? What does my marketplace look like? Even if, let's say, your competitors all use the color purple or the color blue in uh, their logos. Do you want to be like everyone else, or do you want to stand out? So establishing those brand guidelines keep you consistent and keep you memorable. And I should also add too, um, it's great for the things that we see, but it's not just on that. It's also on some of the things that we hear, like the sonic brand. They call it sonic branding, which is kind of like a short jingle. What does that sound like for your company or your brand? And you might have to determine whether or not certain sounds communicate the personality or the
Mm.
attitude of what you do in your business.
Wow, that's deep. I love to think in terms of how we show up, that there's kind of a rhythm or a cadence. But wow, I love that concept of adding, as you're calling the sonic branding, of adding the sounds into that mix, which is really cool. I'm grateful Jennifer Gerald came up with a song for us for Be Visible Shifts. And I am excited because finally have a chance to really share it in August. We hadn't really shared it. It's kind of been, the gem that was sitting there. You're mentioning colors to avoid, and in some cases, sounds to avoid. What might be some ways that we could select them or discover which ones to stay away from?
Right. So that's a great question, Melanie. Well, there are certain colors, for example, that communicate maybe some, what was say, negative things, depending on the industry that you're in. So, for example, like things that are in the red are typically not, if you're talking about money, it denotes a sense of loss. So if you're in a financial industry, you probably might not uh, use a lot of red, or if you do use some red, you might balance it with a color that symbolizes trust. So it depends on. I would say it depends on the industry that you're in. Then also it depends on what you're trying to communicate to the customer with what you do and the problem that you solve. Um, ten, Tends to be that if you use blues and greens, things that are in the earth, you tend to be a little bit earthy, more trustworthy, tend to be grounded. If you tend to use browns and greens. So, and that psychology works in our minds, and we don't even realize it's happening. That's the amazing part of it. And that's kind of the art and the psychology behind it, and that's almost moving from that art into the science part. But then you can ask customers or your audience what kinds of things they respond to, the things that they like to see, or the things that they would find relevant. And that might help give you some ideas on how to communicate with them.
That's a great idea. I remember, and especially it's funny as I was starting to prepare the course and the master class, I was thinking of in terms of the course, asking some people what colors they responded to and showing them potential logo colors. So if we have an opportunity to use polls, that's one way. If we have a larger budget or we're about to take a deep dive, maybe focus groups, do you
Hmm.
suggest
Yes,
using?
absolutely. Hmm.
How would you build a focus group in our current world where, and I want to thank you because you're helping me prepare for a future topic, which is on language filters. Somebody I was in a clubhouse room with, Jackie had welcome, amazing Cheryl. This woman, Jackie Robinson, has a podcast. I think it's called Trip of Change, if I remember correctly. And it's about encouraging generations to have conversations we wouldn't normally have. I think it's gen to gen. I'll have to look it up from last week. But one of the things that I loved about our conversation in Clubhouse, and we were in a room talking about diversity, was she mentioned that someone mentioned to her that there are now 84 pronouns in
Mm.
between different generations. So we were talking about the different language or filters. If you were building, I remember years ago in the city filling out marketing surveys, and it was a great way to make money during like an hour and a half of lunch. They'd call you in. You weren't sure what bells you had checked off, whether it was,
Right.
from a diversity perspective or an age perspective or where you lived or something we consume. But if you were building a focus group these days, how in the world would we even start?
Well, the good thing is, um, certainly there are market research firms out there that can do this kind of thing in a very controlled environment, so that they're recording all the responses in a way that doesn't muddy the waters, right? Um, so I would probably start there, and there's survey tools that you can build. And the thing is too, platforms like Zoom, video chat platforms that have things like polls enabled. If you can assemble a group of people for a situation. Maybe you call it a mixer, maybe you call it a get together, and have people network, but then also give them, you know, the opportunity to tell you what they think about, certain questions that you ask them, so that you can create your own focus group. You can even align with an organization, maybe like, a marketing organization or association, or someone in the PR space. And maybe there are groups that will help you do this so that it's less of an economic burden for some of the businesses that might find it hard to do it.
That's a brilliant idea. So when I host our next live mixer, be careful, be afraid. I'm going to check with Michael and we will test the markets. I thought it was so interesting when she was mentioning all the different gender pronouns. This came up during Pride Month and just conversations as we're trying to figure out who an ideal client is, or
Mhm.
if we have a niche, that we fit in, or we have more than one niche, that sometimes that generational part of reaching out to everyone from young children to families to teens to new buyers to experienced or savvy buyers. I was at a birthday party recently and it was a blast with an amazing DJ, and I we hadn't been out dancing in such a long time, and the venue was picked because of its ability to serve people of different cultures.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because we used to live in Hastings, not so far from this venue. So I was delighted to finally be there. But I watched the culturally and the age, they served everybody from the
Mhm.
person with accessible special needs to the person turning 75 to the person turning 65. And maybe the youngest guest was 25. And you watch whether it's in marketing or outreach, how you're reaching people of all sorts of ages to excite or delight them, whether it's with a product or a service. It can seem so challenging or so daunting. So thanks for really reminding us of other places to start.
I was going to say something too. I'm glad you brought that up. And at least from the business person's perspective, if they have a firm, they have a company, well, everyone knows that you need to have an online presence, right? Everyone knows that you should, at least if you're trying to build an online presence, social media is helpful, right? But and not everyone should be on the same platform. On all platforms, there's certain platforms for certain kinds of things. You won't post the same content on LinkedIn that you would on Facebook. And there's some overlap, but you certain some of these platforms have different audiences. So when you were talking about, being able to serve people at different generations, in that situation, it made me think about like how some of these social media platforms are, have some of their own audiences, and that we need to be aware of that when we're creating our content and putting it out there to the world.
It definitely does. It's daunting. What I love is one of my strategic alliances in mental fitness and on Clubhouse, Shirley Felder. Shirley is having fun on TikTok, really reaching new audiences. And so she's posting content based on the time that people in different time zones are on.
Mhm.
It can make some of us look nocturnal as solopreneurs or small companies. I personally need my power naps to keep it going, and I'm grateful they have popped up during launch season. I'm grateful. I took 3 naps last week. This is a launch week. I'm hoping for 4. But I think that reminder as you're trying to reach others on different platforms to do it in in different ways and do it also with great care. So I love that you're reminding us about the research or the taking steps part, really to kind of make it scientific. For those of us who are marketing, and I love that you mentioned the use of red maybe before, which made me think of Wells Fargo or Bank of America. So larger companies that are using colors or messages. But from the perspective of science, if we were a smaller entrepreneur or a dreamer just getting started, trying to create our own lab to test our marketing experiments before we share them on a platform. Any tips for that dreamer or startup who's just getting started?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say do a lot of your research. Uh, do your own research first, right? Uh, Try to consume as much of the marketplace to get an understanding what is out there. Um, there's a tool that I'll sometimes use when I work with clients, like a mood board, when they are looking for something in their project and they're like, well, what kinds of things are out there? And then I'll present to them almost like a platter, if you will, with different selections, on this platter. And they could say, I like a little bit of that and like a little bit of that. Maybe not so much this thing, but I like this other thing over here. So then you put all of that together and get their feedback. And then you take that, and I would take that and take it back and then create something, and then we can continue to go down this process and then get their feedback. Well, I think you can do something like that as a business owner, kind of in your lab, where you kind of, like I said, do some research to see what's out there, and then get feedback from your business community, folks that may be on boards that you serve with, folks that are part of a chamber or part of a committee that you're on, or even in networking groups. Get their feedback, and you might have to incentivize them with an Amazon card or something, but if you can get their feedback and then take their mood, get their temperature on how these things look. And that might give you some indication on whether or not you should move forward in one direction with a set of colors and of course, once you get that idea, work with a professional to help you solidify all that information.
I love that idea of testing, especially using like chambers or membership associations, in the my promotional product days, still always will be a gift or incentive lady, but in promotional products, I had come from the garment industry. So kind of the trash and trinkets, became the promotional products, but the schmuck, the threads trade was before it. And I think what was really interesting was watching people as they would test things, whether it was during a buying week or, as you were saying, incentivizing it to get somebody to come and check it out.
Mhm.
I love also watching people now do maybe like a customer appreciation event. So you have a chance to check with people who have engaged with your business or your brand, thank them for incredible support, and reach out to them in a way as you're celebrating milestones, as a way to like bring people in or just reconnect with them. And I think sometimes that can be the science part. These are people who engage with your business, your brand, with you previously. You're doing something new, you can reconnect, you can reestablish a relationship, maybe also as things change, we build referral partners that
Mm.
way too. I think one of the things that's hard is you're mixing it or you're testing it. If you're at a chamber and you're not yet uh, part of an inner circle, you haven't been adopted yet, you don't have a mentor yet. I remember those days. I'm grateful to be adopted early. and and people are like, this child needs some help. I appreciate, because the introvert, I didn't, I went to a networking event while I was working full time, and I was exhausted. I had worked a 10-hour day, and here I am at an event, and you'd been up since, oh dark 30 commuting into the city,
Mhm.
50 miles each way. And here's an evening event at a time I think I could have been in a comfortable chair at home quite happily. And I
Right.
remember a woman saying at the end, "Hmm," they pulled my buddy aside and said, "She needs to learn how to talk." Fear sometimes of the marketing when you're in a crowded industry. In promotional products, I worked for somebody who, was like an ASI multi-million dollar roundtable producer. I wasn't really sure when I started out in the same industry how to
Mhm.
start. I'm
Right.
grateful as you would say, for scientific studies at conferences or listening to really great presenters. And now online, you can enjoy any wide variety of sources to help us keep the learning or the learning to earn or the inspiration. But I love that you're mentioning news sources really to do the research. Way
Mhm.
back when I remember a FedEx newsletter was how I learned about networking and how to network.
Hmm.
And it's how I started following Ivan Meisner and BNI years before becoming a BNI member and now BNI alumni. What are some sparks? And I miss having a local AMA chapter. They were amazing. It was my first chance to sponsor an event that wasn't chamber related. I remember, a woman in business said, "Hey, I'm the speaker. Want to sponsor?" And I'm like, "Sponsor for who?" She's like, "Business people in the Hudson Valley." I'm like, "Sure." And away we went.
Right.
Where would you suggest we start if we're at that point of trying to identify people who can help us turn marketing into a science? You mentioned great polls, great surveys. Hopefully we're getting the right, responses from
Mhm.
people we're interested in. Maybe an event from our clients or a networking event is a way to do that. But what would you say are good ways that we're in environments, online environments, maybe surrounded by other people in our industry?
Mhm.
Maybe you're in direct sales where there's a lot of people in skincare or, in health and wellness
Yeah.
products. If you're in those type of industries, just starting to make your way or try to, build a new brand, where would you suggest they start with research?
Mm. Right. So that's a great question. I would start with that industry. They must have like a trade organization for that specific industry. So, as an example, um, I was I have a client who's in the fragrances business, and I wanted to know everything there was to know about fragrances. And so turns out there's this organization that has a lot of stats on the number of men that wear certain fragrances, number of women that wear, or percentages or rates, um, you know, what it looks like in the US compared to Europe. And just so many insights that it blew my mind. And I was like, wow, this is exactly the kind of stuff I was looking for. Even on a state level, they had some data that really, gave me some new ideas. So I would say look in that specific industry for some of the trade organizations. One or two or many of them may publish some sort of yearly report that talks about any insights for their industry because really they're trying to get people interested in that into those careers, and they're trying to uplift their career. So and the industry itself. So I would start in that realm, and a lot of it's freely available.
That was great. I thank you for reminding me. Somebody had reached out for mentorship through Business Mentor in New York, and they were a baker and they were interested in hiring and setting up a business in the city. And I thank them for reaching out to me for like marketing or ideas or networking help. But I ended up looking up and finding a local organization for chefs that would perhaps have somebody in a specific area who could mentor them about the art
Mhm.
of hiring, that could maybe introduce them to interns to hire as new employees. And we laughed. I said, "Is there a bakery you love in your local area
Right.
or in the area that not necessarily in the area you're thinking of opening a store or a facility, but
Mhm.
in your local area, somebody who could mentor you, who you could just have a conversation with?" So I love your idea to really tap into the experience and the stats part. And I'm a numbers girl, so I really enjoy that. And I'm doing some some geeky research. I have to remember to reach out to Michael about that online.
Couple of things I wanted to add too, and it may jog my memory. Two other resources. I would say Facebook groups are also a great resource for learning what's going on in various industries. There's like a Facebook group for everything, literally. And then the other resource is it's a magazine app called Issue. If you go on that app and you search for things like bakery or bakery equipment, or fragrance industry, or any kind of industry, there's a magazine for everything. So you can find out a lot about what's going on in a particular industry if you're just getting started, or if you're established and just want to know more.
And welcome, welcome. And please let us know. We're grateful you're joining us. Let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know some of your zones of genius so we can help introduce you to other people. And I'm glad at Michael's beautiful smile there.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
And I do see some familiar LinkedIn comments. Hi, Tal. I know Tal from the American Marketing Association. It's good to see you and see a lot of others that jumped on. Mel, you did have you wanted me to talk a little bit about like just do a list of the art and then the science part.
That sounds fabulous.
Okay, so on the art side, let's say as an example, we have short form video. As you know, everyone knows or has heard, if you're in business, that doing short form videos like via TikTok or Instagram Reels is a good idea. So how you do that and come up with that content, that's kind of like the artsy side. Everyone's heard about storytelling and creating micro stories to hook people at the beginning of something that you're doing, or just hook people on what you're producing or the problems that you solve. Storytelling is definitely on the art side of marketing. Sonic branding, I mentioned a little bit about that. Those are kind of like these mini jingles that people would hear at the beginning of a logo or reveal, or maybe on a commercial. Think of Intel, HBO, Hulu, Netflix. They all have or T-Mobile, the da-da-da-da-da, that jingle that we hear, and we immediately know that that's T-Mobile. That's that Sonic branding. Branding guidelines is certainly on the art side of the marketing part. Now on the science side, think about trends. Trends and ways that those trends are being aggregated or displayed. Google search, keyword research, that's going to impact your marketing, certainly. Predictive modeling and artificial intelligence, machine learning, that's certainly on the science side of marketing. A lot of that is helping to understand how people are buying, what kinds of ads people are responding to so that they can make purchasing decisions. And also on the science side, transactional data, using that data to kind of see which people are most likely to buy and what kinds of patterns they might use. And then the last thing I had for like on the science side of marketing would be testing. And any marketer, any business owner can do this with testing something as simple as blog headlines, or even if you're sending email in the form of email marketing, testing your subject lines as a result of what people are going to open and then hopefully click on, so that you can engage with them.
Those were fantastic, Michael. And I know, see, one of the great things about hanging around with this brilliant man is you never ever know what gems he's gonna drop, what mic, and as Cheryl says, always test. I think sometimes too, as we're talking about the science part too, is trying to figure out if the laboratory environment is safe. So in some cases, we may be in Facebook groups with drama, or others have hidden agendas. And I've heard everything from the wonderful people who talk about being admins of a group, and all of a sudden they no longer have control of the group, or they no longer have control of a conversation. And now in some Facebook groups, there's the ability to post anonymously. I'm grateful to be in illuminations groups for talented entrepreneurs with no drama, no nonsense, just a safe place to be and promote. But if you're online and you're testing and it's not necessarily the right spot, how could you select a new spot with confidence? Or do you select multiple spots? Like, would you test something in a couple of groups or just one to start?
Right, that's a great question. I would test it in a bunch of different places. The lovely thing about being an entrepreneur now with the internet, there's like there's so many stones that we can lift over and see what's on the other side of them. So many leaves that we can pick up and say, "Oh, this is cool." There's so many sites, so many apps that you can use to test, experiment, so that it can confirm a question that you have in your mind. I think having that curiosity to test different platforms and see how people react, because there are different audiences on different venues and different places, different sites, different Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, different channels. Even Clubhouse, for example. There's first we thought we had to have a big room to have a make an impact on people, but really you can have a huge impact in a small room with just five people having the valuable conversations. So I say test and experiment in a lot of different places as much as you possibly can, whether it's Eventbrite or Meetup or Hopin or you know, uh, try a lot of different places because you might be surprised on what you find.
I absolutely love that. And, I like that you mentioned in the beginning the AMA. That was a great safe place for me to test in the beginning. Somebody would help me come up with, the equivalent of what I wasn't a good elevator pitch kind of person, which is really funny considering at one time I studied drama, saying the same thing over and over. It just so wasn't my thing. But I remember experimenting with new taglines there and meeting people who were in PR or who wrote for local newspapers or local media, and or who were coaches and authors, and getting some of that feedback,
Mhm.
which is, really, 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 really vital. So I have to thank you for that, and remember to come carpool with you or find out where another chapter might be in the Hudson Valley to come hang out with. I miss the one that was in the mid to upper Hudson Valley.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
maybe we'll find one in another state.
Well, certainly. Happy to do it. I love road trips, for sure. In terms of AMA, there's the New York Capital Region American Marketing Association. We have one in Rochester, and then there's one in New York City. So three here
That
in the state.
that sounds really cool. I'm gonna come check out the one in the capital region when I next travel up for another visit to hang out with family. Is there anything, Michael, that how would people find you, get in touch with you? What are great ways to do that?
Thank you, Mel. Yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. Uh, LinkedIn, I'm there as Michael Roach. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Michael Roach Creative, and my website is michaelroachcreative.com. So I'd love to connect with you. Send me a connection request. I'd love to chat. And no matter where you are, I'd love to talk about marketing and ask you questions about what you're doing in your industry. And yeah, I just like to be a resource to people.
You definitely are, and a valuable one, and really such an amazing pleasure meeting you. It's such a reminder when we're meeting people online. I met Michael online in a group that I've never attended a live event. The group was set up and schedules. I couldn't attend a live event. And they had a virtual community. And I clicked through Michael's bio one day and it's just a real reminder to take the time as we're debating whether marketing is an art or science to show up and occasionally be really curious, politely, with discernment, and you'll find an amazing, talented professional at the other end. It's a real great reminder. And truly, I am honored you are joining us today. And I can't believe I forgot we were both from the Valley. I tell you, it's probably testing that there is a nap in my relatively near future today in between masterclass challenge sessions. But I really wanted to thank you just for joining us today. And as always, to thank Catherine for being in the back of our green room and studio and for lighting major trails, and to thank Tal and Cheryl and Chris for popping back in to join us. Whether you're joining us live or for replays, we really appreciate your time, your energy, your keen insights. Keep weighing through on topics that you'd love for us to approach and to discuss, and with great questions. And Michael is an extraordinary teacher. He taught me so much about Canva. He taught me how to navigate it. So as I said to Jackie Barker on Friday, I thought I had blown up my Canva accidentally. I was in a shared document. I obviously was typing a little quickly, but I'm honored because Michael taught me how to navigate, and I actually had the courage, woo, to go into Jackie's template and create the visual for our live today. And Michael said, "Look great." I'm telling you, he sent me like almost to the moon. So I just want to thank you just for your encouragement. You're an extremely patient teacher, a very talented, generous man with your time and your energy. And our world, we are so, so grateful for you. And I'm honored you are the professor. We will catch you soon, with a patch sweater in the winter, as you're heading out to delight new students. But thank you for Smiles Across the Miles, as always, Michael, and just for your time and your energy today.
Thank you so much, Melanie. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Always this delightful gentleman. Don't forget to click and check his upcoming workshops and check his great website, and just really stay in touch. One of the most patient, wonderful teachers. Pleasure to meet him and connect and collaborate with him at every opportunity. Thank you again for joining us live or for replays. If you are celebrating, virtual toast to you across the miles and smiles across the miles. And thank you for popping in and sharing us with guests. And please keep your great insights coming. Stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, and please stay in touch. Take great care.